Welcome. Trauma is my jam, and by that I mean I help you understand what your body is doing. Let's make sense of it together.
It's not that trauma destroys memory, but trauma certainly changes what the brain prioritizes remembering. So I can remember how someone made me feel, but I can completely blank on their name. And listen, it's not because I don't care, because I care deeply. It's just that my brain was prioritizing different information when I was given the person's name. This is one of the things that I noticed about myself for years. And when I am in highly social environments, networking events, new groups of people, unfamiliar environments, my short-term memory almost completely disappears. And for a long time, I judged myself for that. Because people would introduce themselves to me, and I would genuinely want to remember their name. But often, I couldn't, like for the life of me. And what confused me most is I would remember things about them. I would remember what they were wearing, things they told me, how I felt about them, and even like the emotional tone of the interaction. But their actual name, gone. It wasn't until I started to learn and understand trauma in the nervous system a little bit more that I began to understand, that this isn't just about memory. This is about nervous system activation. And when we walk into environments where our nervous system experiences an unfamiliar, overwhelming, highly stimulating, or socially demanding, our survival system becomes more activated. And for me personally, I already know this before I walk into those environments because my nervous system is slightly activated just going to the event. New people, new environment, lots of interactions, the social pressures, constant processing, and even though I have done an enormous amount of work on healing, my nervous system still responds to those environments. And this is where understanding the brain has become really important. The truth is, we have two different systems in the brain doing jobs. We have our thinking brain, which involves our prefrontal cortex, and this is the part of brain that is focused on this is the part of the brain that helps with focus, organization, decision-making, language, working memory, and short-term memory. Essentially, our thinking brain helps us think clearly. But we also have the survival brain, the limbic system. And the limbic system, well, its job is protection. So when the nervous system detects stress or possible threat, the survival system activates. And when that happens, the prefrontal cortex, that thinking part of the brain, becomes less efficient. So your brain literally starts shifting resources away from your thinking brain and towards your survival monitoring. Now, this is really important. Your nervous system learns through experience, not logic. So in those moments, my brain is not prioritizing language or name encoding. It's prioritizing environmental assessment. Who feels safe? What's the energy in the room? What tone are people using? How does my body feel? Because the survival brain tracks emotional and sensory information first. Let's put this into a real-life situation. I want you to imagine yourself walking into a networking event. There's noise, movement, conversation, new faces, social expectations, and somebody walks up to you and says, "Hi, I'm Sarah." But at the exact same time, your nervous system is already processing the tone of Sarah's voice, her body language, her facial expression, the environment around you, and is searching for safety cues. So even though you heard the name, your brain did not process and encode that information because it was busy with all the other information. And then later, you can remember everything about Sarah. You can remember that she was kind. You can remember that she works in healthcare. You can remember that she was wearing a green blazer. And you can remember that you felt comfortable talking to her. But the name, her name, much harder to retrieve. And listen, that doesn't mean that you're unintelligent or that you weren't listening or that you don't care. It means that your nervous system was working hard. And honestly, you cannot socially perform and regulate at full capacity when your nervous system is overloaded. So, what can we do when we find ourselves in these kind of situations? First and foremost, we have to learn to reduce the shame. Because if you're walking into a social situation already criticizing yourself, you're only elevating your nervous system and activating it even more. So we got to let the shame go. Because you're not doing anything wrong. It's just your brain is prioritizing different information. And second, we need to learn to work with the nervous system instead of against it. And one thing that can really help is orienting before we enter the environment. So before I walk into the room, I pause. I feel my feet firmly planted into the ground. I slow down my breathing and do a couple intentional breaths. Or I orient myself and allow myself to intentionally take a moment to look around and scan the room. What I'm doing is inviting a moment for my nervous system to have experiential information to know that we are safe in this space. Now, the second thing that I do is when somebody tells me their name, I slow the interaction down. So instead of rushing into the next social thought, I have learned to start repeating their name back. So something like, nice to meet you, Sarah. And then connecting that name to something sensory or meaningful. So Sarah in healthcare, Sarah the nurse, Sarah green blazer. And the reason this helps is because your trauma brain, which is being activated in that moment, that survival brain, if you remember, works on processing and remembering emotional information, sensory information, and relational information. And that's what working with your nervous system in your brain looks like. Because here's the thing. I spent years being like, her name is Sarah, her name is Sarah, her name is Sarah. Not recognizing or understanding that the thinking part of my brain, the part of my brain that receives information through language, is not really functioning well at the moment when my survival part of the brain has taken over. And now learning that my survival brain processes information through emotional, sensory, and relational, I can use that information to say, Sarah the nurse. And I have a better chance of remembering Sarah's name later on because I put that language information, which my brain isn't processing in that moment, to information that it is able to process at the time when it's activated, which is the relational, which is her being a nurse. This is what it looks like. So instead of fighting my brain to work, I've learned to work with it. And that's why I come on here and I make these videos and I share this information with you all too, because I spent years fighting my brain and my system, only to discover that if I could just slightly shift what I was doing, that I could work with my brain to get the results that I was looking for. Because at the end of the day, I want to remember Sarah's name, not just that she was a nurse in a green blazer that was kind and that I had a good interaction with. I'd like to be able to tell somebody about Sarah the nurse instead of being like, I met a nurse. She wore a green blazer. Sounds ridiculous, right? Oh, goodness. I laugh now looking back. But anyways, now that I know this information, that's why I share it. Because when we can learn to work with our brain and our system the way that it needs the support, then we heal faster and our life improves. And literally, that's the whole entire goal. All right. Honestly, learning all of this changed the way I viewed myself because I stopped seeing myself as being bad in social situations and having a bad memory. And instead, I started to understand what was going on in my system and what information my body and brain needs at the time, which has helped me prioritize and live a very different story. And honestly, learning all of this has changed the way I viewed myself because I used to be highly critical of myself. I used to walk out of situations and go, what the hell is wrong with me that I literally can't remember that person's name? Or embarrassed that I would have to go back and say to somebody, the nurse in the green blazer, do you remember her name? But once I started to understand, I then learned that there was different ways that I could deal with this. So again, the slowing it down and repeating, hi, nice to meet you, Sarah, is a technique and a tool that I use that helps me give the chance of walking away from that interaction with Sarah and remembering her name. So, if this sounds familiar to you, welcome to the club. There are many of us, and this is your brain. There is nothing wrong with you. This is just exactly how your brain is working and adapting. All right, so that brings us to the end of this video today. Thank you so much for watching. If you are interested in learning about more trauma-informed education and content, I invite you to subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest videos. And also, if you so feel inclined, if you could do all the things, like, share, subscribe, so that we can help push this video out to help build this healing community together, I would really appreciate that. And lastly, if you are interested in exploring your own personal healing journey in a little more depth and looking for support and feel perhaps maybe called to work with me one-on-one, you can find my information on how to connect with me in my bio. I want to thank you all for being here today, and I hope you have a very blessed day.